I'm all about genre fiction. I'm all about pulp. I'm all about stories that entertain me. But that is not to say that something that is commercially successful, something that is popular, can't also be high art.
Guys, welcome in. Welcome back. If I'm extra giddy, it's because we have a very special episode tonight. A very long-awaited episode that I'm extremely excited for. Um, we're like this guy who we have here, Frank Theodat, is beyond a genius when it comes to men's adventure fiction. If you've stumbled upon this video, you stumbled upon this channel, you're a men's adventure fiction fan. We kind of speak the same language. We like the same stuff. Trust me, you're going to want to hear this guy talk. And so we're going to be talking about men's adventure fiction, pulp, kind of like that genre. What is it? Is there a revival coming in? The history of it. Frank knows it all, and I'm very excited for this conversation. So, Nathaniel, can you introduce the man himself?
Yeah. We have with us here today Frank Theodat, an absolute legend of the press. He is the editor of Pulp, Pipe, and Poetry. He also has how many short story anthologies do you have online?
Oh, well, for published in print and ebook, it's one and a
Okay.
half. I've got one that's in the pipeline, but
Very cool.
currently on the Substack, which is where Pulp, Pipe, and Poetry, or P3 for short, is hosted. We've got well over, probably 2 dozen or so short stories from
Man.
across four guys, including a novella that's currently being serialized from a contributor. So there's a lot of variety in there in terms
No,
of fiction and poetry and essays and articles.
that's so good. And you wrote the Pulp work ethic article last August, I think it was, and that really pushed me into gear. So personally, I have to thank you so much for that because that inspired me to just churn out a bunch of words this past year, and it's been an inspiration to me, that whole ink and grit pulp work ethic. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into new pulp, the pulp revival, whatever we want to call it, but we'll get into talking about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate the invite, fellas. I think this is something I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Following first Luke and then Nathaniel in just your online presence, both in your YouTube channels, respectively, your projects. So the fact that I get to be here and talk with the giants among the kind of indie pulp route is just too good of an offer to pass up. So yeah, just a little bit about me. There's really nothing fancy about, I appreciate the introduction, but I stumbled upon this whole pulp cultural history purely by accident. My son was just born. This was almost 3 years ago because he'll be three in December. I just am a frequent visitor of the library. So while I was on paternity leave, home with my son, my wife said to me, why don't you just go, take a day to yourself, go to the library as you usually do. So I just went and I found some beautiful collections of, I think auto president. You can probably see it right in
Oh
the
yeah, dude.
corner right
Nice.
there. Yeah,
Is that
big.
the
Yeah,
big
it's the
book of
big book
crime?
of a big book of like Pulp Fiction Crime by Otto Prenzler. It was basically the biggest eye candy I could have found in the library, and I immediately checked it out and just devoured it. So much so that I didn't want to return it back to the library, and then I ended up just buying my own copy. Um, and yeah, it just opened up a whole world because not only was I did I find it so engaging as the stories often of that era are, it was the writers that were just as engaging and just as interesting. Which then, one thing led to another, and then I started my own Substack newsletter called The Pulp Fictioneer, which was basically an outlet for me to kind of geek over all the great pulp writers, Frank Gruber, H. Bedford Jones, the Louis L'Amours of the world, the John D. MacDonalds, all these great writers from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and even into the Reader's Digest and paperback, mass paperback era. All these great writers that came from this era of just pure ink and grit, of just just putting hammering the keys, as it were, and putting out all these great stories. That's really what started. It was just a simple trip to the library. Here we are about, 3, 4 years later, and things have just kind of ballooned out of nowhere. So to give your listeners more specific insight, as the editor of Pulp, Pipe, and Poetry, which by the way a was born out of just a pure caffeine, nicotine high, if you will. And I said to these four other guys who are kind of my partners, well, not kind of, they are, but who are my partners, and I said, let's just start a magazine. Let's just do in the same style, in the same tradition as the legendary pulp magazines, Black Mask, Weird Tales, Thrilling Mystery, Thrilling Adventure, the short story magazines, just a variety pack. And there was some reservation naturally because it's a huge undertaking when you just say, let's start a digital magazine online. Like, it's a huge commitment. But I think after just convincing them, we launched that baby probably within 24, I want to say 24, 48 hours.
That's incredible.
With the name, a logo that was just kind of done by a friend of a friend. And we just shipped it. We just kind of said, let's hit play and see what happens. And we're a year in of the publication. We launched in July of 2023. We're currently hosted on Substack, and over 800 subscribers later,
Crazy.
Amazing.
we're still hitting it, hitting the way. I mean, it's been wild. So when Nathaniel says that my article, The Pulp Work Ethic, inspired him to write for a full flipping year, I feel pride in that, because not only did that push you and propel you into writing your own fiction, which is what it's supposed to do, but it also, you're one of probably 24 people who have DM'd me or written me nice letters and emails saying, hey, because of this one article, it's probably my most impactful article to date, of just guys starting novels, guys getting back into writing, guys trying to write fiction. That was never my intention, was to kind of start this, to light this primal fire and urge to end fiction. That was never my intention. I never had such grandiose visions. I just said, hey, this is pretty cool. Let me put this out there and share it and see what happens. No expectation whatsoever. So the fact that you and so many other guys have come to me personally and said, it is because of this work that I am now launching into a career of fiction writing, is, that's just, that warms my heart, and that in itself is already too good of a reward, if nothing else.
Oh, it's a damn good article. We'll link it below. We'll also link P3 as well, because you guys are doing great work. But yeah, just listening to you guys talk about that, it's so cool to see guys coming together with a common shared interest of bringing short fiction to people and resurrecting one of the greatest genres or subgenres of our time. So it's so cool to see people passionate about it and bringing it back. I know that's what me and Luke love. I mean, that's why we're here right now. So very cool.
Yeah, and similar roots to what you said, where it's like, I just need a place to geek out about this, right? Like,
Yeah.
There's something in these stories that resonates so strongly with guys in particular. Like, there's just something primal, as you said, that primal fire. These images that are on the covers, the stories they tell, the characters in them, it all like just, it makes me want to do more and like be more. And that's what I love so much about what you do, is it's not just, as you said, the stories, it's the authors. And that's a connection that you and I both have. I love diving into the authors. I'm an author's reader. I always tell people that, like, if I'm reading a Mark Cameron book, I want to know about Mark Cameron. If I'm reading Louis L'Amour, I want to look into Louis L'Amour's life. Tell me about that. What inspired him? And also, you are becoming that, right? Frank Theodat is, people are looking into that, and I love this about you is that you are embodying and living that pulp like work ethic, and seeing the rate at which you're producing stuff and quality stuff, and building this real amount of content for people. That's so inspiring because more and more I feel like people's mindset just gets in the way, and we have all these creatives out there who are just they have amazing ideas, they've got the next great thing maybe, but they're too afraid to hit send on it, to your point. Like, they just will hold themselves back, they'll make whatever excuse, they'll really get in their own way. And that's why one of my favorite quotes is that custom auto thing about, it's not a fighter getting beat by a better opponent that's a tragedy, it's when a fighter beats himself.
Yeah.
And so I just thank you for what you do for the community and the individuals and the author, and like the author's spirit. Is there a particular favorite author that you gravitate towards most, that's most interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. It's like picking, a favorite child.
Right.
If you've got a large family. I mean, I can in terms of writers, the ones that have been truly inspiring for me, mostly because they each play a different role. I won't go too deep into the weeds of it, but I mean, the first guy that really got me into reading for pleasure and showed me the power of what short stories can do, especially with twist endings, is Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury, being the sage of fiction and being so prolific in science fiction and fantasy, really regaled for the short story form. He wrote several novels. Fahrenheit 451 is probably his most famous one, but I think Bradbury alone is probably known more for his short stories because it was a medium that he really much wanted to master, and he eventually did. He is the one who started the whole write a short story a day, or 52 stories a year, to get people into the habit of writing, and that's how I started. So for him, he's pretty much like he's my gateway drug.
Yeah.
Mars is Heaven was the first short story. I mean, I'd read Poe in high school. I'd read Desiree's Baby and Flannery O'Connor and Hemingway and all those, and they were wonderful writers, wonderful stories in itself. But Mars is Heaven really just kind of knocked me flat on my butt and just said, wow, this is what fiction can do. This is what short stories can do. And then again, just kind of leading into that rabbit hole. In terms of style, in terms of just output and just personal gusto, another, more leading into the science fiction and fantasy realm is Harlan Ellison. I mean, I'm a fanboy for Harlan Ellison. His famous story is probably "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream." And it's he wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of short stories, 3 or 4 novels. But he's pretty much influential for me because he has the gall, he had the spirit, the fire that lit him, from learning of the era of the pulp writers, during his time in the 50s when he first started writing, and continuing on until he passed away in 2018. Insanely prolific, insane output. I mean, he's often touted as having 1,200 short stories and essays and screenplays and articles. Like, he was a powerhouse, and he was also a kind of a force to reckon with, just personality wise. But his style and his respect for the form and for the medium of short stories really resonates with me. His famous saying is, the trick is not becoming a writer. Lots of people can become writers. Lots of people become writers every day, but the trick is staying a writer. And that's true. That's really what it is. So those are the two that have really made an impact for me. Now, it's kind of someone who I've been studying privately, more related to the men's adventure fiction, and I brought a little show and tell as well.
Absolutely.
Is a gentleman by the name of Max Brand, otherwise known as Frederick Faust. This is a out of print. I highly recommend it. This is what I've been working through for my next Ink and Grit piece. Max Brand, the Big Westerner. This was actually written by Robert Easton, who is his son-in-law, and it's just, if nothing else inspires you to write, pick up that out of print biography because going by his pen name Max Brand, um, who originally wanted to be a poet, uh, could not sustain a living as a poet,
Hmm.
but he had such proclivity and such talent and such a unique voice for writing westerns, for writing
Mhm.
pulp stories, that he eventually found his way into finding a way to just finance his career um, as a pulp writer. And it details from the time of when he was a little boy, and his father would send him out to get oil for to heat the house, and because his father was a failed lawyer and they had no money, they said, put it on credit. And he, at the age of 8, knew that he just hated poverty. He knew he never wanted to be poor again. Uh, so for that, to be just kind of have an impact on him, and then to go off to college and have the admiration of his college professors as a student and as a writer, having such love for poetry and history and fiction, and to have the notoriety of being a scoundrel. He was part of the freshman smoker, which was basically the boxing ring between the freshman incoming classmen and the sophomores, and they would basically duke it out in their
Sweet.
first term. And that he had the reputation. I mean, he just has the spirit. This is what we're talking about. That primal
Yeah.
urge of just write or die, or uh, you know, uh, ink and grit, as it were. I mean, those
Yeah.
those are the three I think have been really the biggest inspiration in terms of getting me started into writing, generating your own style of writing, and just writing with no without looking back. Just kind of putting words on the page and just screw it, just get it done. Attitude of it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's huge. Writers in particular can be very self-conscious people, and they will waste their whole life. They'll waste all these manuscripts stuck in their head. I always say, like, you don't want to trap your dreams in your grave because you're gonna die at some point. And like
Right.
I love the pulp work ethic for that same reason. I love pulps for that same reason, where it's like
Mhm.
maybe not every story's gonna win you, a Pulitzer Prize and like
Yeah.
all this stuff. Like just write. Like
Yeah, just do it.
I love the craft of writing. You love writing. You like stories. Like just get out there
Yeah.
and do it and produce more. And the more you do it, the better you'll get too. Like that's what
Yeah.
other people don't understand. It's like you just slaving over the same chapter over and over and like
Yeah.
rewriting it. That's not going to get you as skilled as just like ripping through short story
Correct.
after short story and novel. Yeah, it's really, if you want to be a good writer, study the pulp writers.
Yeah.
No one got more practice than those guys.
No, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to kind of really market Ink and Grit,
Yeah.
which is a new series that I'm working on for the magazine. For those who don't know, Ink and Grit is basically all about the pulp writers, who they are, what they did, why they did it. A lot of these guys and some women did it for money. They did it for cash. This was around the time of the Great Depression. There is nothing. What I love about the pulps, it kind of flies in the face of the typical idea of what a writer is. This kind of waking up, well after 8, 9 a.m., strolling down to the cafe, smoking a cigarette, drinking black coffee, and just kind of like, woe is me type of deal. There is nothing romantic about being a pulp writer. Most of these pulp writers, Harlan Ellison, I'll give you a quick story on him. Harlan Ellison, when he started in the 50s, lived in a $10 a week room that was just infested with any kind of pest you could think of. And he would basically write like his life depended on it, because for a lot of these guys it did. If you didn't write, you didn't eat. And that's great motivation to get words on the page.
Right.
And he would bang out a 3,000, 4,000 word short story in an evening. He'd go over to the publishing house in New York, which is where he lived. He'd get his $30 check. There was his rent and there was his meal, and he'd do it all over again. I mean, Frank Gruber, another book I'd recommend is the Pulp Jungle by Frank Gruber, which is another one that is kind of right over there.
Nice.
That's pretty much my pulp corner. But Frank Gruber was just so desperate to get broken into the, to break into the pulps. He had other people who were well ahead of him, and he wanted to do everything. He had every rejection possible because even though it was a hot paying market and you could make a fortune, which many of these writers did, so many of them had to face rejection. And it was just, well, it's one no is closer to a yes, basically. And Frank Gruber got so close to breaking into the pulps that one of the editors basically said him, "Hey, this is okay. We're not going to accept this, but do you have a Western?" And he didn't have any Westerns, but he said, "Yeah, of course I've got some Westerns." He literally went back to his newsstand, grabbed as many Western pulps as he could, and that entire night flipped through them, read them cover to cover, studied the format, and basically just kind of wrote to that specific market because he needed the damn cash, folks.
Right.
That was really what it was. There was no arrogance, there was no pretense. Like, this is a very humbling position to be in. It made a lot of people a lot of money, but you basically, if you didn't produce, if you didn't have the activity behind you, it didn't matter. So he basically, the entire evening, and he breaks it down beautifully in the book. At 8 o'clock, I had a protagonist. By 10 o'clock, I had the villain. By 11:30, I had the outline. By 12 o'clock, I had this, and then pretty much by 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, he's done, fresh off the typewriter.
That's so
There's
sick.
no, they had no computers at the time. Everything's manual.
Yeah.
Hunt and peck, as it were. They rip it off hot from the typewriter. He hands it over to the editor, and the editor accepts it, and he's finally in the game. He's a pulp
Dude.
writer, and then you just kind of keep moving. You keep going. That's what ink and grit ultimately is. It's write fast, get the words out. Get the words out there. Don't think. Thinking just, this is something that Bradbury had on top of his desk when he wrote on his manual typewriter. He goes, "Thinking hurts creativity. The more you overthink this, and to Luke, to your point, the more you think, oh, should it be this word? Should it be this sentence? Should it be any of this stuff? It doesn't matter. Just get it done. Just get it on the page. And then finally, publish often. Like, once you get into a rhythm of just getting out of your own way, which so many new writers and aspirants and young people in their field, they get so stuck up here that they don't, let their fingers fly as they should and tell themselves the story. Once you get into that rhythm, that path of just churning out work, publish your work. And it doesn't have to be a physical book. It can be a blog. It could be a newsletter. It could be among a community of friends, of which you both have kind of pioneered. Just get it out there. There is great value in sharing your work, whether it's for money or whether it's for pleasure or a hobby. I think there's great pleasure, great value in getting that rhythm, writing fast, don't think, and publish often.
I see. This is why you got to be reading Frank Theodat, because if that didn't inspire you to pick up your typewriter or your keyboard in this generation, I don't know what will. Like that, I love that, and you want that in a form that you can read from a great author himself. It doesn't get better than that. That's why you gotta head over to his website. You gotta read that Substack.
You got to be quick to type as you are to draw your gun. It sounds like,
Yes.
you got to be quick with it, man. I think what strikes me from listening to this is it's so cool that people made careers out of just short stories. I feel like the modern push is so much like, oh yeah, you have to be writing like 60,000 plus word manuscripts or else you're not a real writer. And people just lock that in. But you said, I think, was it Harlan Ellison? You said he wrote like 1,200 short stories and maybe
I mean, Harlan
3
Ellison.
novels.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote probably 3 or 4 novels, but he was a master of short form. I mean, I can't
That's
show
so
it to you
good.
now, but it's, the library expands, but I have probably 15 of his short story collections, even including his 50-year volume of work that came out. And it's just, he perfected, or I shouldn't say perfect, but he mastered that form. And that was what inspired him is in his opinion, and I kind of agree with this, the short story is just its own beast. I think the problem that a lot of new writers come into when it comes to short stories is that they think that, oh, well, if I want to be a novelist, if John D. MacDonald or Donald D. Westlake or Ed McBain. If these are the
Hmm.
writers, they wrote novels, so I have to write novels. But if you want to write novels, by God, man, write novels. I think there's this misconception that in order to write, you must start with short stories. You can, but you
Right.
don't have to. It's not either or. It's its own unique form. That's all there is. And I think short stories are starting to come back with a vengeance.
I feel like
Yeah.
you could be a professor of pulps. It'd be so. I would go to that. I'd go to that school. I'd watch that lecture
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
you
Sweet.
say people have already? That's already your title. They've
Yeah, no,
already.
I mean that's kind of like my unearned my unearned unofficial like street name, I guess. Because yeah, I mean like when you're reading all this stuff, I mean part of it is right. It's just so many people don't know about this.
Yeah.
I think young people don't know about this. I think if you grew up with like the Shadow and the Spider and Doc Savage and everything else like that, if you're old enough to remember holding these originals
Well,
or
what's
close to
crazy
them,
now is it's almost 100 years ago. So
right?
even
Wild.
Exactly.
people,
So if you didn't grow up in a household that had
yeah, yeah,
you know access to this, and you want to write, and you want to write fiction specifically, this they don't teach you this in your standard MFA school.
yeah,
You know what
not
I
at
mean?
all.
Yeah, it's definitely
Right.
how I didn't learn about Louis L'Amour or the pulps until I was in my 20s, and then also the thought of being a
Right.
writer that I always wanted to be. I thought was like, Hemingway and all like the literary things. And that's why at first every time I wrote I had to have a thesaurus out and I was like, well, this doesn't sound like legit enough, And it's like,
Yeah, I
well,
mean that just kills so many
yeah,
writing careers off the bat. It really
it
does.
does.
And
Well,
it's nothing to say that there's anything wrong with like there was no word for literary there was no divide between literary fiction and commercial fiction. Like this is a whole new, not I shouldn't say new, but this has kind of been, a it's a useless argument. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
right.
if you read something, whether it be Dickens, and Dickens wrote for entertainment anyway,
Right,
because
right.
the man had to get paid as well. You know what I mean? Like he had
Hmm.
he had a bunch of kids, and candlesticks weren't cheap. So you just gotta he went on these lecture or not lecture, but he went on these tours in like New York and Philadelphia and Boston. And that's part of how the man got paid. He had his Dickensian fan base were just his days of Swifties. You know what I mean? Like Taylor Swift
Right.
fan. That's how it was. And if a man could earn his living that way, well then good on him. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I
Right.
think that's
Yeah.
where where so much of this wasted energy goes to is this argument between literary fiction and commercial fiction or genre fiction. It doesn't matter. Like you're where this is not going to be solved in our time. It's going to continue on for our kids' generation and their generation. Like this is still going to be a back and forth clash. And I think it's just such a wasted time because as Bradbury, as Ray Bradbury says, there's room in your head for both Tarzan and Shakespeare. Do you know what
Right.
I mean? Like it's
Right.
just you don't it's not one or the other.
Right.
You can enjoy Proust, you can enjoy Kafka, you can enjoy, the high school reading list if
Yeah.
that's your cup of tea, as well as Mickey Spillane, as well as Ian Fleming, as well as all the great dead writers that wrote for money. And to speak to specifically this to show you how old this debate is. Ian Fleming has a great essay. I don't know if you gentlemen have read it. How to Write Thrillers, that I think he wrote in the 50s.
Oh,
Very
very
cool.
cool.
And yeah, it's a great masterclass in how to engage the reader. And that's pretty much what a lot of commercial writers often have success in doing, is that they write with their reader in mind. Not necessarily write to market, but they
Right.
know that there's another person on the other side of the words that they're putting on the page. And they want to respect their time. They want to respect the dollar that they spent on doing it. And Ian Fleming talks about how he had a cousin or a relative that wrote for, the literati crowd,
Hmm.
and he kind of had it out for Ian Fleming because he was more successful or commercially successful, I would say. Like he made good money writing the James Bond books, as many of the many people know. And
Right.
his relative just couldn't understand. He just couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand that. He was writing real art, and I think that's where I kind of just get bored in this whole conversation. Is that what it's not for us for contemporary people to tell other folks the books that are coming out now, this is a book that will stand the test of time. Like, we'll be dust by the time that gets answered. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
the fact that you're, to bring part of my show and tell, American Pulp, uh, you've got all the greats. You've got John D. MacDonald, you've got Ed McBain, Mickey Spillane, Lee Brackett, you've got Evan Hunter. You've got all these great writers who are all gone. They're the fact that their stuff is still being read today, albeit for a more niche, passionate community, a smaller audience, but they're still being read. And I think that is ultimately the true staple of if a writer is worth their salt.
Mm.
Can your story sustain the attention and the interest of people outside of your era? Outside, beyond your time in this space. And I think, Luke, you talked about, you know, in a previous episode about, it's kind of useless to think about, oh, I'm gonna be one of the great writers, for decades and decades. Like that's not why we do this. That's
Right.
not why you should be doing this. You should want to write because you feel compelled to tell a story. You
Yeah.
love stories, My son and I, my son is 2, and we spent like literally all afternoon just having a lightsaber battle and just watching some Star Wars. Now, is that because Star Wars is considered high art? Is that because Star Wars is the pinnacle of space opera, which I know it isn't? No, it's because it reminds me of my childhood and subsequently all my other friends who had a similar relationship to some of the media that they had, whether it be film, whether it be books, comic books, whatever the medium may be. There is a
Hmm.
certain affinity for like, wow, I want to tell my own space opera. I want to write my own science fantasy or science fiction. I want to, if you're looking at cowboys or pirates or whatever, like that fills you up. That makes you feel something, and you want to take that energy and you want to express it in your own way on the page. That's what it's about. So for me and my son to go out there and just like have a lightsaber duel out, in 40-degree weather, it's an expression of the human spirit. It's something that you kind of can't really articulate, but stories of that nature, whatever the books, whatever the movies, they stay with you
Right.
and want to share that experience, maybe in your own way, maybe with your kids, whatever the case may be. I think that's what writers, upcoming writers and beginning writers should focus on. Not focusing on posterity, not focusing on how much money they're going to make. Like if you're not really writing because you feel compelled to, why are you writing? That's something I
Right.
would ask.
Yeah, it's a great point. Oh, go ahead, Nathaniel.
Yeah. That. Uh, I mean, I'm floored. Look, if you got something to say, you better say it while I gather my thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's so important for writers to get, like you said, all of these conversations out of your head. Like it doesn't matter what genre you're gonna end up in, because that's a whole nother, cluster in and of itself. Whether let's forget for a second, are you mass market or are you literary?
Yeah.
Are you literati crowd? Are you horror? Are you science fiction? Are you mystery?
Yeah.
Like those are just like, you gotta not think of those conversations. Those are for marketers, those are for the businesses, that's for other people to do. To your point, Frank, it's like there's a story within you. There's something that drives you, there's something that motivates you, there's something you want to say. and say it in a very entertaining way. And I really love that you touched on that, where it's like the writer who has the intention or the understanding that there's a writer or there's a reader on the other side of this thing, and having them in mind. I find that another weird thing to come out of the literary world is like you only have to write for yourself, and it's like that. If you want to write for money, then like be
Right.
a writer for a living. You have to consider that someone's going to read this, and you don't want to just write something so idiosyncratic to you.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a great way to make a living. So yeah, to the writers out there, just yeah, we always talk about the kid within you, the guy, the kid who used to go out, like you said, have a lightsaber battle outside,
Hey, man.
just playing in the woods. Like you have to reconnect with that version of you,
Yeah.
who turns the brain off, who has fun, who tells the story.
Yeah, it's a crazy dichotomy too, where it's like, okay, I'm writing for money, but I'm also writing because the story is just welling out from within me, and I gotta put it on the page. And I think that that's what's so beautiful about it. It's like you don't most of the time you're not going to decide to write unless you want to, right? Unless you have this passion for it. No one's just like, oh, this I could probably make money doing this. I don't really like to write though, but I'm going to just push through it and make it happen. But it comes from exactly what you guys are talking about. I mean, I think I write because it's no longer socially acceptable for me to run around with my best buds outside with guns and swords, right? And I still would do that. If I could get some friends to do that, man, I would go to I mean, me and Luke are going to meet up sooner or later to film some stuff, and we're essentially just going to be doing that. And I think that every time I'm sitting there writing, this will pull into the fighting heart of man. When me and Luke were writing back and forth this short story that we wrote together, it was exactly that feeling. It's like there's nothing, I mean, to have it with your friends growing up and then to have that rekindled with your son now, dude, there's no more beautiful full circle than that. It's so cool to see. And then to take that inspiration that comes from these stories, these movies, this entertainment that you took in and shared with your friends, with your family, and now to use that to inspire your own personal stories, it's just like this beautiful creative cycle that needs to be pushed into every aspect of life. I think it's so beautiful to hear that and so inspiring. I mean, it fires me up.
Yeah, I mean, so earlier I spoke about the Ink and Grit articles on Pulp, Pipe, and Poetry that just kind of deep dive into the pulp writers. Two writers I will mention that kind of speak to what we're really talking about in a more succinct way. The first is H. Bedford Jones, who wrote, let's see if I have it here. Here we go. This Fiction Business, Canadian-born writer of pulp that wrote, I think, about 400 short stories, 200 novels. I mean, the man was a beast, and was basically asked to kind of write this how-to book on how to write fiction. And I wrote about this, and really, I recommend reading it on the magazine. But to kind of put it, bluntly, when asked, what rules should one follow when it comes to, when they're first starting out in writing? And he basically says it plainly, like, there are no rules. Like, no one can really tell you how to. There is only one way to write a story. Do you know what I mean? I know plenty of people who write with, are discovery writers, which is what I am. I don't really plan. I don't really outline. I just enjoy the fact I get to tell myself the story. Sometimes I do okay. Sometimes I hit it out of the park. And sometimes I suck. That's just really the nature of it. But it doesn't matter because the end result, it doesn't really, that the whole point of it is just telling yourself the story and writing to entertain, writing the stories that you want to read about and entertaining yourself in that way. And if somebody finds value in it, if they find a little bit of entertainment, great, wonderful. I know other writers who are meticulous with outlines. They have to either outline the beats or they outline certain scenes that they want to write. Go right ahead. Whatever gets you to the writing chair, whatever gets you producing, have at it. And H. Bedford Jones talks about this. There is no only one way to write. There are no rules when it comes to writing. And the second individual I will talk about is Arthur J. Burks, who wrote for Weird Tales and wrote for many science fiction and fantasy stories. And he basically, to the point that we were talking about earlier about why write, he says the slanter, who was more known as the person who wrote to market in that era, or in those days, the man who writes to market is probably more commercially successful by, bar none. But for him, it's the act of the write. It's the act. The act of writing is why he does it. He talks about in the article, um, how he feels as when he's not writing. When he's not writing, he's a terror. His wife can't stand him. His kids, fear him. He's just like a walking hurricane in his own home if he's not out there just creating something. But when he's writing, it's such a it's this feeling, it's this emotion that we're trying to really nail down and express here. It's because he just there's a part of his soul that just descends. There's just, it's this indescribable sensation that he feels. There's a sense of joy. And he says that if you're writing for that, if you're writing with that intention of just joy, the joy of creation, then you're off to, you're off, better as a writer than you are for the person who is solely out there for commercial purposes. Like, I'm all about genre fiction. I'm all about pulp. I'm all about stories that entertain me. But that is not to say that something that is commercially successful, something that is popular, can't also be high art. There is something, and this is, to the point I was making earlier, there is something that when you go through, when something that has lasted, something that was written 100 years ago that is still being read today, that's not just commercially sound. That's not just a commercially successful story. There's something in that story, whether it's the characters, whether it's the mood, whether it's the theme, that resonates with its reading audience. And if you can transcend that from 100 years prior to 100 years later, you were onto something. And that's ultimately what I think many writers aspire to, is to be read, not just read in their time, but years from now, decades from now.
Yeah, and again, with the labels not really mattering, is
Yeah.
Dumas writing his stuff back in the day was pulp. I mean, it was serialized pulp adventure stories that
Yeah.
are now in the classic section, and the
Right.
literary crowd has taken him in as one of their own. It's like
Yes.
it's like it's very interesting that we put all this weight onto that now, but look at
And
that. Go ahead.
yeah, it's the same for Poe. Edgar Allan Poe was
Hmm.
the same way. The man wanted
Yeah.
to just make his magazine. And most people don't even realize this, he wrote comedies. Most of his stories were comedies, not horror. The
I
only
didn't know
reason
that.
he wrote certain horror stories that he did was because he knew that it was sensationalist. He knew that would grab would
Yeah.
grab readers, and the man was hurting for money.
Yeah.
It's not like it is now, right? Like, you can write a short story, have it look proofread and edited, have it formatted, slap a cover on there, and have it on KDP or drafted digital, like that.
Right.
And in those days of the days of Poe, to have anything published, whether it be a magazine or a book, that's manual labor you're talking about. It's cost prohibitive during that time. So I can't blame somebody for that who wants to write, things that are gonna basically be viral in his day, like things are gonna help him kind of give that boost of better profit margins for him to establish his career. But it's to your point, yes, Poe was never considered, high art. I mean, he was more of a critic than he was known more as a critic in his day than a writer. But yeah, his stuff is now read in high school.
All
His
right.
stuff is now considered that, and it's so funny how, whether it's Dickens or Dumas or Poe, how that just kind of happens almost
Or,
organically.
or even
You know?
Arthur Conan Doyle. The Sherlock
Yeah,
stories were originally serialized fiction. You could argue he was the first pulp detective.
yeah,
So it's crazy. I think it also, this whole conversation kind of makes me think of, and this is switching mediums, but it makes me think of like Oscars and how the majority of the Oscar nominated films nobody has ever even heard of. And it's because
Right.
they decide to go for this really like heavy, impactful literary type of thing where, oh, it's going to make you feel all sorts of things. And sometimes the movies are just shot for the sole purpose of making you feel bad or uncomfortable. And I think that
Right.
that's so interesting because there's a lot of the Oscar movies that do win that are not necessarily like this super high art literary form are some of the greatest movies of all time, and they can still be
Yeah.
movies that make you like feel happy at the end or make you not feel uncomfortable the whole time. And I think it's really interesting how you can see these actors who they come into the game and they get like an action movie or a couple action movies under their belt and they're like, okay, well now I want to be a real actor. And then they spend
Right.
10, 20, 30 years filming these Oscar bait movies that either get attention or they don't. And then at the end of the day, they're like, oh man, I want to go back to making action movies again. And you got people like Tom Cruise, who's made so many movies, and now I would say he's in like the prime of his career, and he's churning
Oh,
out
yeah.
these blockbuster movies that are saving movie theaters, right? And it's like just so cool to see that kind of switch flip in his head where he was like, "Oh, I should just tell stories that I love and that I want to tell and people are going to come flocking to it." And I think it's so cool to see that. It's so inspiring to me because it's like, yeah, you can definitely get into your head. I know Luke's talked about it before on the pod. He's like, "Man, maybe I should start like maybe I'm not a real writer if I don't write literary stuff or something to that thing." And it's like write what you want to write, man. It doesn't like
Yeah.
it. Don't worry about what other people think about it. I think
Yeah.
it's and that's what you came to that conclusion yourself. You're like, I got to write what I need to write, and there's
Yeah.
nothing more um, fulfilling than writing what you're supposed to be writing and not what other people are telling you to write.
Yeah, and I think so. 2 points on there. I mean, yeah, like if you're not writing things that you're just not into, why the hell are you writing? And especially if you're solely writing to market, like if you're writing what's that genre? Romantasy, because it's the
Mm.
new hottest thing that's being pushed on by Goodreads or whatever. If you
Yeah.
have no care for that genre whatsoever, if that doesn't speak to your soul and to your heart as a human being, my God, there I could probably name you five different professions where you can get money much faster than just trying to churn out, half-baked romantasy genre books. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? And to Nathaniel, to your point about film, I think even though we primarily delve into uh fiction or prose as the medium, even though both of you are working on um film as well. Um the thing about that medium, it's still it that and pulp. There are correlations with it that are very interesting. One of the things that I've been actually looking into is how art movements are born. So literary art movements, but also film movements. And when you look at whether it's new wave science fiction of the 60s and the
Hmm.
70s, whether it's new wave film or whatever cultural section in that you want to look at in history
Yeah.
of when film. You look at guys he passed not too long ago. Roger Corman, the king of the B movies. Roger Corman. A book I'll recommend is his biography, How I Made 100 Movies and Never Lost a Dime. I mean, if you are interested in the pulps, you should be interested in the B movies as well, because it's the same kind of meticulous, like, let's just get it done. Let's not think too hard about it. We're putting out a product to entertain a certain demographic of the population that is going to want to be into this type of thing. Let's just hammer out and do it in the most efficient and economical way possible. I mean, Roger Corman's whole film career, he started off with the James Camerons of the world, the Francis Ford Coppolas of the world. Like, even though he had this whole kind of lowbrow film, the man built his career on understanding what audiences wanted, or what audiences were willing to pay for, at least, and just giving them that, instead of all these often, more often than not, expensive, highbrow arts films that
Yeah.
nobody sees. I mean, it's even, I don't know if you guys remember during the pandemic, when pretty much everything was closing out, and then movie theaters started opening up. One of the biggest movies that just kind of went gangbusters was Godzilla versus King Kong, which is pure pulp.
Yep. Yep.
It's a, there's
Doesn't
nothing
get much
there.
better than that for Paul.
It really doesn't. I mean, you had all these other films that most people, I would venture a guess, don't really remember. I certainly don't.
Yeah,
I don't think I saw
I
any of
can't
them.
think of anything.
Right, exactly. But Godzilla versus, King Kong, like, yeah, it's a older IP. It's a familiar IP, but still, people went to the movies because they wanted entertainment. Another example that's kind of all over Variety the past couple weeks is Joker 2 just bombing both at the box office and with reviews. And what is it, Terrifier 3, which I had never heard of,
Yeah.
which is another clown horror film, which is surpassing. It's like, making so much money, and people are just going to see this film because, again, for entertainment purposes, for entertainment
Yeah.
value. And you know when you talk about B movies, or when you talk about movies, it's the same thing with pulps. It's just that they know that there is another person on the other side of this art form that is going to be consuming this. Let's not waste their time. Let's at least try to give them a good show. You know what I mean? So I think they're both kind of related in that way.
Yeah, Frank, you're a very special individual. If someone's so smart that they can connect synapses in someone else's brain, because when you're just talking there, just re contextualize my whole life on why I like Sylvester Stallone. Because
Yeah.
I mean, go back to his start for writing Rocky. It was very
Yes.
similar to a story you told earlier, where it's like, "Do you have anything else?" And he's like, yeah, I do," but he didn't. And then he went home and wrote Rocky because he was like, "Oh, I told him I had this script,"
Yeah.
and he like painted his windows black and just sat in this. He said it was so small he could like touch, both walls
Yeah.
where he was living. He
That's
just
so
wrote
sick.
this thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
and no, and look at the movies he's turned out. I mean, it's the pulp mindset of like, I'm gonna give you entertainment. I'm gonna be the action hero. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna be the Oscar winner. I'm gonna be the action hero 15 times in a row because
Yeah, dude.
this is what I want to do. So
And
thank
even, yeah, even to that effect, Stallone is a great example, because Stallone writing and making Rocky, which came
Mhm.
out in the 70s were quite dreary for a
Yeah.
lot of films at the time, both from our perspective as just kind of being young contemporary guys, and also at the time of that era, because when the golden age of Hollywood kind of crumbled and ended in the late 60s, and all the older guys that were just kind of selling off, their remaining interests, Warner Brothers and all that, to the big, oil companies that were owning the studios. You can look at the culture, like, of 70s films. Like, yes, we had the classic Scorsese films. Yes, we had the great John Milius written films. We had Apocalypse Now. We had all these great films that have stood the test of time. But still, those were kind of the hand-picked ones that just kind of, time said, yes, these will be considered the classics from here on out. Everything else is just kind of, during that time, extremely nihilistic and depressing. And here comes Stallone, here comes Sly, who's making a story of someone who's trying to overcome himself, and who's trying to uh, prove to himself that he still has it, that he still has that edge. And it's essentially, as he's said in later interviews, it's a love story.
Yeah.
But even if you listen to some of his interviews at the time of how he conceived Rocky, he said he was just tired of all the depression that was just being put out there in the studios. We are now in the same era today, gentlemen. If you look at some of the media that is coming out now, whether it's film, whether it's certain TV, whether it's books, whatever it is, comic books, all the mediums, it's dreariness. That's the last thing that these people want. That's the last thing that paying customers, who are working jobs that they probably hate, for bosses they can't stand, for little pay that, they that they can barely, rub two pennies together and get their bills paid on time. Everything is more expensive. Like, we're back. The pendulum is swinging back, gentlemen. This is where we're at. We're in this era where people are kind of looking for escapism. And you know, I want to be always cautious about just going for, only escapism, because it doesn't solve the root of the problem, but that's a whole nother story. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is similar to what Stallone felt when he conceived of Rocky and when he made Rocky. He wanted to give people, a hero that they
Right.
could root for, someone that they could see themselves in. Because who hasn't been knocked down? Who
Yeah.
hasn't lost a fight? This great thing we call life. That's the ultimate battle. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's what so many people, especially men, resonate with. And that's what he felt. And I think that's why it still to this day resonates with so many people. Because it's not by its nature, it's not a movie that is based on division. It's not about this person of this race or this person of this religion or this person of, whatever checkbox you want to put it as. It speaks to the human spirit. And that is what all great stories do. They speak to the human soul as they are, and all the trials and tribulations that come with living in life, and just showing you that, yeah, you know what, you too can overcome this. You too, if you are dedicated enough, and if you have the right fire in you, you can overcome anything. And that's why Rocky still, made you know, uh, such an impact. Same thing with Star Wars. George
Yeah.
Lucas had made other films before Star Wars. They weren't well received, or they weren't as, they didn't change the film landscape
Yeah.
as Star Wars does. But Star Wars, when it came out in 1977 or whatever, wow. I can't even fathom being a kid and your first, like, if you've never picked up Lee Brackett's space opera books, or if you've never read Ed Hamilton, if you've never read, space opera science fiction, if that wasn't what you grew up with, and you're just seeing Star Wars for the first time in the 70s, when everything else is just kind of gloomy and dull. Wow, what a ride. There's it doesn't when you put that into perspective, that context, it shouldn't shock anyone that made such an impact, because it speaks again to that heart and to the soul and to the passion. And again, Star Wars is just George Lucas's version of Flash Gordon, which again comes back to the pulps. That's where it is. I mean, the pendulum's swinging back. We're in the right time.
Well, it's so interesting to say that, to say in the right time, because it brings us back to something we talked about earlier, which is the resurgence of the short story. And I think that, I mean, what you're saying is just hitting the nail right on the head for me and Luke. I mean, the Fighting Heart of Man, our short story collection, and kind of the whole entire backbone of this podcast is that discussion of, we want stories and characters who are heroes, who people can look up to, who, I mean, there's going to be tough times in these books. There's going to be sad endings. There's going to be happy endings. But at the end of the day, there's always that thought of, like, this is a character, a person pushing to their ultimate limit to find good, to save lives, to make the best of a situation. And that is
Right.
what this whole genre is all about. And so to be here as that pendulum swings back to these dark, depressing times, a very divided world, people hating each other for no reason other than just different beliefs, to have, I mean, also what you said about working jobs where they hate them, they hate their bosses, and then to be able to sit in a position where you're able to inject entertainment into their lives. I think that's why short stories are going to make a resurgence, and are kind of making a resurgence as we speak, because it's, we live in this world where we have these phones on us constantly, and a lot of the people who read now only, I think publishing realized that most of the people reading are older, like they're still reading because they were when they were younger, and those people are okay reading these long, big, thick books that are political thrillers or long romance novels, and they're able to kind of sit in these deep, detailed books. But the people who are going to be buying books for the next 50, 60 years are our generation. And these
Right.
people are stuck on TikTok, scrolling through something that can only hold their attention for 30 seconds. So when you slide a fast-paced pulp adventure story that only is like 25, 30 pages, like 3,000 words, like you were saying, those pulp writers are sitting in, clicking out those 3,000 words, going getting your $30 and paying for your rent. When you give them something like that, something that literally grabs them by the shirt and pulls them in and makes them read it, maybe clobbers them with a right hook or something, that's going to get their attention, and that's going to make them think, oh, maybe I should keep reading more. Like, and that's what you guys do over at P3. That's what we want to do with our short story collection. That's what we want this whole entire podcast to be is, yes, reading is not cerebral and makes me have to think about how bad my life already is, because damn it, I already know that every single waking moment. I know that. I want something that's going to make me enjoy life, and it's going to call to mind higher values. I think what you were saying about escapism is like, yes, you don't want to be solely escapism, but if you're able, even if it's just the subtlest hint, I mean, slip in something heroic, slip in something like life is bigger than the struggles I'm going through, you're knocking it out of the park.
I mean, I started. Go ahead.
No, I mean, yeah, it's I think we are just starting. I really do. Even though independent writing and independent publishing is really we're really in the thick of how things are shifting. I forget what the specific statistic is, but I mean 2016 saw about 65% of all published books were independently published, and I think now in 2024 it's around 70-ish percent.
That's crazy.
The big five publishers are over time have been slowly losing market share. And I think, because I know you two are you're working on film. I mean, technology as it rapidly advances, we soon discover that soon everybody will have, their own film, their own novel, their own short story collection, their own video game, their own comic book. Like we are so I mean I'm excited to see what's on the horizon. Ultimately, what I say to myself and what I say to my partners, the future is bright because we choose to build it. And I think as long as we have guys, who share that belief, that hang on to hope, that have that stubborn optimism, that have, you know, that passion for storytelling and for heroes and for adventure and for just thrilling excitement and to tell stories that speak to the human heart, that move people, not things that they can't control, not
Right.
outer external stuff, but like what's in here in the human heart. Yeah, there's with the sky's the limit. It's only up from here.
Absolutely perfectly said. I think, this episode has lived up to the hype. It was long awaited for a reason. This has been a blast. And that kind of brings us into like pulp recommendations for people. There has been a lot sprinkled throughout the conversation, but if someone were to ask you like, hey, what are some pulps I should read? What would I like? What do you like? What do you tell people? What's your go-to recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. There really is. And that's kind of what pulp hype and poetry is trying to do, is just to kind of help curate and just try to, give a spotlight to all the stuff, both old and new. Something that I'm trying to do as the editor is give a spotlight for all the new stuff that's kind of coming down the pipeline, because there's so much, right? There's not a shortage of writers. There's not a shortage of books. There's not a shortage of stories out there. The question is just to find things that really are a cut above the rest and that are really going to make an impact. So I won't dive in too much of new stuff, or contemporary stuff rather. But I mean, in terms of just what I find that really moves me and things that I always come back to, so much of my stuff is out of print, right? I think for me, if I were to recommend writers specifically, Oh man, because we're in November and because it's, noir November
Yeah,
as it's approaching, I'll start with, the typical the usual suspects of crime and noir. Mickey Spillane. I think Mickey Spillane in terms of Mike Hammer and that just noir, that just grittiness, that the character that, is not afraid to get his hands dirty, but is always out there looking out for the little guy, which is Mike Hammer. I have to recommend Mickey Spillane. Um, I think I think you guys, you know where to go for westerns. So I'm not gonna try, Louis L'Amour, Max Brand. I won't try to go in that route. But I think, yeah, I think Mickey Spillane, definitely if you're in that noir vibe. I think Ed McBain. I think John D. MacDonald. I think if you're going for science fiction, specifically more, flavor of space opera, the Queen herself, Lee Brackett. I think if I were really to make specific recommendations, pick up a short story collection. Pick up this one, I think, especially if you're in the crime mood, American Pulp,
Cool.
edited by Ed Gorman and Martin H. Greenberg. Let me see. I think start with the short story collections.
love
Get a
that.
taste
Love
of
it.
everything. The Big Book of Adventure pulps is also good. That's got a lot of good stuff. I think in terms of some of the newer stuff that I'm trying to piece together, I'm actually listening to Donald Hamilton. I think that was one of the ones that Nathaniel had recommended. I think it's
Yeah,
the Matt Helm
Matt Helm,
the Matt
dude.
Helm stories.
Love that guy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, they're very very entertaining. Yeah, there's just so much. I think for anybody who's really starting out, pick up some of the short story collections. If they're out of print, that's usually a good sign.
Right.
Yeah, but I'll keep it as simple as that. Being in November that we're in right now, and in the
Yeah,
crime and the grittiness, you can't go wrong with the guys that I mentioned before.
absolutely. Great picks. Yeah, Mickey Spillane has some great covers too. Like just pick those up. They're
Yes.
Yeah.
like the absolute art on them. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think there's just so much yeah, I mean true in terms of like the good artwork, in terms of the good just holding those like mass paperback, like those smaller books in your
yeah,
hand, something that you can put in your back pocket. I think that
Yeah.
goes a long way. There's a lot of practicality to that stuff. You know what I mean? There's so much like these were designed for the modern reader. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's the perfect size. It's the
That
perfect
is
size. I mean, my
perfect.
my book, is smaller than this one, Grind and Other Strange Stories. This one is like 6 by 9, and I had this
Nice.
as the preview cover, and I just absolutely hated the size for what I was trying to go for. So every subsequent book that I'm trying to put out has to be that mass paperback size, because I think it has to come back because it's just the most practical form for books.
yeah. That goes back to what some of the stuff I love about Pulp, and you've touched on a lot of it, where it just seems so kind of realist and like practical and kind of like blue collar almost, where like it was
Yeah.
understanding that people have lives and like jobs and things like that. So if you're
Right.
reading, it needs to be convenient and things. So I love that size and I love the pulps. How about you, Nathaniel? What's your recommendation for the people for
Uh,
pulps?
I'm actually going to go. So this is also out of print, and it's from the Big Book of Adventure Stories that you just referenced. Uh, One of my favorite short stories ever. It's called Frost Rides Again, and I believe it's by Horace McCoy, and it's about a guy
Mm.
named Jerry Frost. And there's like 15 of these short stories that were written about this guy, but they're all out of print. I found two of them in short story collections, just like you were talking about, and he is a Texas Air Ranger. So apparently in the 30s, 40s, 20s, that time frame, this was a thing where they would fly and guard the border. And there's this the Frost Rides Again is such a great story because it starts with him. I think he's in Juarez, and so he crosses over from Texas to Mexico, and he's trying to get this woman out of a really sticky situation, and he's got two suppressed pistols, one in a shoulder holster, one on his hip, and it's great. It starts with a bar fight, and it just rips roaring from there. Um, so a very entertaining book, and if you could hunt down his stuff, let me know because I really, really enjoy that character, and I've only read two of the stories. But I
Yeah,
think that I would be remiss to not talk about that big book of crime
yeah,
stories that you talked about. I remember very similar story. I went to my um, college library and I saw it. I said, dude, this is what libraries are for. Let me see if I can find this. And you could order it in from any other library in the state. So a couple days later, I had this thing. It is thick, man,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's exactly what you want to see. You got these stories, and they do a pretty deep dive on each author too. So if you want to read about that ink and grit, that pulp work ethic, you can get information about them, and then you can just go through. And I think it has I think it's Raymond Chandler's Red Wind in there. That
yeah.
one's that book. That short story is so good. It has one of the greatest lines of all time in it. I ended up. It's on the library app Hoopla. So, and it's in audiobook form, and the audiobook is like 56 hours. So if you got a lot of time on your hands,
Yeah.
grab that bad boy and just listen to the audiobook. And I remember there's a video saved in my Snapchat because I sent it to all my buddies of a line from that book. He says something like, it's just about the girl and how she's making a monkey of the gun because she's got the safety on it. And she says, don't move. And they're both sitting down and neither of them was going anywhere. It's just like, it's that snappy dialogue that just pulls you in. And you're like, man, not only is like this descriptive and visual and a good story, it's also funny. Like, and it's not funny because it's a comedy. It's funny because it's a very high stress situation, but it's goofy stuff happens in the middle of it, and it makes those high tension scenarios even even more tense because of that dichotomy between the two. So yeah, those would be my two suggestions. What about you, Luke? You got something for
Love
us?
it. I do. And the snipers amongst us might have been able to snag it and see it earlier, but I'm going with an alumni of the podcast. We're gonna go Zane Carrington by Charles F. Millhouse for a
Very
modern
cool.
pick. First off, the art, like he's bringing back the beautiful pulp art. It's beautiful. Like it looks
Yeah.
amazing. And Zane Carrington is one of my favorite characters just because he's so human. And we talked about that on the episode with him. Like I
Uh-huh.
love the fact that Charles kind of gives these more human versions of the pulp hero. It's kind of, taking what we love about Doc Savage, but then kind of making them more relatable, making them more human. And the way, the kind of like when he gets in trouble in this, you feel like there's so much tension. It's like, is he going to get out? Because it's almost like me in a situation. It's like, maybe. I mean, it's really going to be a tight one there. It's gonna be risky, but so it's really makes you feel the danger. And he packed so much into this as far as like story and character development in such a small short story. You
Yeah.
really it has twists and turns and kind of like heavy emotions to it as well. So
Very
I think
cool.
it's just a very well written short story. So yeah, the Zane Carrington is what I'm going with.
Yeah, and we'd be remiss not to suggest that you guys check out Frank's short story collection. We'll
Absolutely.
we'll link it below. And
Wow. Yes.
also,
Right. Strange stories.
yeah, dude, it's so cool to have. Um, that's something that we don't talk about enough on this podcast. It's kind of like the strange stories, the weird West, the
Yeah.
like just the
Yeah.
weird tales. It's so good. It's cool to have, and they have like that little sneak in of horror. So if you still have that need for a Halloween fix, you can get some strange stories on there.
The best way I try to describe the stories that I have been writing, although I'm trying to venture into new genres that are in the tradition of the pulps, these stories are more Twilight Zone stories,
Perfect.
where seemingly ordinary people go through extraordinary situations. They find themselves in very weird circumstances and trying to get out of them and seeing if they change. And a lot of it is fantasy, a lot of it is surreal, a lot of it is horror, and it seems to kind of resonate with my small yet mighty readers because there's a lot of there's also some satire in there as well. So yeah,
That's
they're
awesome.
just basically if you enjoy Rod Serling's original Twilight Zone series, then Grind is a book for you.
Very
Sweet.
cool.
And again, with the great art. Love the cover. Absolutely love it. Great cover, like colors popping on that, and
Yeah. Oh yeah,
sweet art.
this took me like 90 minutes in
Sweet. Beautiful.
Adobe InDesign, just like some licensing art. Yeah, that but that's this is what we were talking about earlier. It's just like the friction. There's less friction now to do
Hmm.
everything on your own. You could be your
Yep,
own
yep.
fiction. You could be your own fiction factory if you really
Yeah.
wanted to. If you really buckled down and got out of your own way, there's nothing stopping you from publishing as much or as little or what you're writing. There are no gatekeepers. The gates are down.
Right. And you mentioned earlier about like people who have their own video games, movies.
Yeah.
Don't limit yourself, guys. I mean, really, whatever you have in your head, make it happen. There's a way to make it happen. It's just about self-belief and a little bit of grit and determination, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's
Exactly. Perfect.
write fast, don't think, publish often.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's it.
There you go.
That's the way to
Get a
live.
little sign for above your computer, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, put that in your office or wherever you're writing or creating. Like that's literally it. Just keep it simple. Just really keep it simple. Write fast, don't think, publish often.
Yeah, it's good. That's something to take to church with you. Um,
Absolutely.
so we wanted to ask you, we've done this with every guest so far. What is your favorite book of all time? If you can
Ooh,
narrow it down to one.
yeah. Yeah.
Putting you on the spot, man.
Yeah,
That's
no. I
that's tough.
mean, it is tough. I will say probably my favorite one because it showed me what was possible in terms of book. And I mentioned him before, but I'll definitely say it again. And I won't go the short story route. I'll actually go with the novel. Um, Casino Royale by Ian Fleming.
Very cool.
I first picked up that book on a whim in the Barnes and Noble because my dad introduced me to James Bond probably way younger than I should have been watching those movies. And I loved, the first movie I ever watched was Goldfinger. And I watched subsequently every Sean Connery film after that. Then I dived into Roger Moore and then Timothy Dalton, George Lazenby, the Daniel Craig, the Pierce Brosnan, all the other Bond films. And Bond is one of those characters that despite how the Craig era had ended, which is a whole different subject, you can kind of see how I feel about how his career ended or how his take on the character ended. But yeah, I mean, the James Bond character was just one of those inventions that had all the right tropes that spoke to all the right things that you want in a
Yeah.
hero inspires you. So I said, you know what, I'll pick up the book. And the first line, uh, the first line being, casinos always reek of cigarette smoke at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like you're already like transported. You're already
Yep. Yep.
hooked into, if you've never been into a casino, you've just been to one just by reading into the first passage. And the pacing of that book flows beautifully. And Ian Fleming, I think, was writing about 2,500 words a day in his villa in Jamaica, Goldeneye, and just like hammering words out. And Casino Royale, which I think is just around 50,000 words, really is the perfect size for that story. I think some stories, work well, longer or shorter, but Casino Royale it's just the perfect book. It's perfect because it gives you entertainment, it sucks you into this world, and it really, really it just shows you what a writer can do. Instead of not just entertain you, but just to put you in a trance. It's basically the work of a magician. Like you forget where you are. You're just lost in this entire world of 007 and what it means to be a spy, to be James Bond. Even though one of the things I will say that surprised me when I first read that, and the subsequent Bond novels is how serious he is. Because in the 60s, kind of, I don't want to
Hmm.
say campy, but like in the 60s, the style of filming with the Sean Connery books, like there's a bit of humor, there's a bit of suave, charm. Like
Yeah.
he's I don't want to say likable. Likable is not the word I'm looking for, but he's kind of easygoing. He's kind
Yeah.
of just charismatic on film. But in the books, like he's a hard, cold killer. Like there are times where he's just kind of tough, whether it's the female character that he's talking to or someone that he's working with. He's just kind of really who he I think played him the best in terms of what I envisioned in the book is Timothy Dalton, because
Yes.
I don't think Timothy Dalton cracks a smile
Yeah.
in License to Kill,
So good.
or yeah, just in any of the two Bond films that he does. I don't think he cracks a smile once. I think he plays it at to the hilt of what I think Ian Fleming originally wanted for the character of Bond.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest surprise. But I mean, the writing is just so good. The story is good. The writing is good. The pacing, everything is just that I would have to say is my number one. That's the one that I go to, not just to reread for studying or how did he do this or how did he do that, but just it's a good time. It's a
Right.
good
Yeah.
time, and I think it's just if you haven't picked up the Bond books, start with Casino Royale. It's just if that doesn't pull you in into the world of Fleming, I don't know what will.
Yeah. Great pitch. I want to read it again now.
Yeah,
I
me
got
too. I'm trying to remember where I have my copy.
Yeah.
Um, and then who is now this is across all media, so you don't have to pick a literary character,
Yeah.
but who is your favorite character of all time, if you can narrow it down to one?
That's a really good one. Wow.
Yeah, it's a heavy hitter.
That is a heavy hitter. Man, I think I'm gonna go with film. We've talked a lot on prose fiction and everything. I think for film, because I think this is someone who I'd want to be, like just for a day. And I feel like this is kind of like the cliche answer. But it's because I really love the first movie in the series, and it's just Indiana Jones.
Mm,
There's just some
perfect.
there's some, like he's like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I know everybody loves like Last Crusade, and there are a
Yeah.
handful of people who like the second one for some reason.
Me.
But I think yeah, I mean, hey, to each their own, man.
Right.
But Raiders of the Lost Ark, that film as a whole, I think it's the perfect introduction of a character.
Yeah.
It's a perfect introduction to the world that Indy lives. It's a perfect introduction to the character, and it's a perfect introduction to what again, thinking of the audience on the other side of the project, what they're about to get into. You know, Indiana Jones is kind of no nonsense, but he's also fun. So he's more of a, if Sean Connery's the more suave, sophisticated, and charming of Bond, like Indiana Jones is more of just kind of he's kind of the world adventurer that I don't think takes himself too seriously, but he cares about the job. He cares about doing he's competent in doing a good job. It belongs in a museum. Like that kind of attitude he has to what he's doing in preserving the artifacts and preserving of history. But there's a lightness to him. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
yeah,
For sure.
I think Raiders of the Lost Ark, uh if I could reenact that, just for a
Hmm.
day, to be Indiana, to kind of be fearless. And that's not to say that he doesn't have fears. The scene where he's on the plane and he hates snakes and everything and that whole thing. Like
Yep. Yep.
it's yeah, it just yeah, he's committed to his mission. He's committed to his profession, field of archaeology. Yeah, I think Indiana is very much one of interest that would be, like he's just fun. He's just a good time, I think.
Yeah. I really like that choice. You can't go wrong with Indiana Jones. He's one of the best characters, one of the
Yeah.
most well-written characters. We talked about him in a whole episode. And
Yeah.
one of the things I loved you touched on, where it's like he's almost this walking contradiction in so many ways.
Yeah.
Where he's
Yeah.
romantic, but he's also like a womanizer, and he's
Yeah.
fearless, but he's also afraid. He's awesome because he's very human while
Yep.
being this
Exactly.
larger than life ideal. And it's like he's
Yeah.
a mixture of both.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of where, because again, going with Raiders, it rips directly from like the old serials that Spielberg and Lucas grew up on, and the serials really just ripped from the pulps. So again,
Yeah.
it's this tradition that's kind of having that resurgence decade after decade after decade. Kind of goes away for a little bit, but then it comes back in with a vengeance, because Raiders is in its form just a classic serial.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was in the Discord. Somebody shared like a black and white cut of of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it works because it's the same beats, it's the same heart, it's the same
Yeah.
feeling of that and mood of that story. But yeah, you're right, Luke. I think yeah, there's something very much approachable about Indiana Jones, in which really like you could have a dad like Indiana Jones, you could have an uncle, you could have a coworker, you could have a professor, you could have like Indiana Jones, you could put him, you could drop him anywhere in time, and he's still relatable in that respect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Very, very well said.
A great episode. Way to end it, man. That was fantastic. We cannot thank you enough for coming on and just giving so much wisdom. And I feel like I learned so much just through this about myself, about the genre. I'm hyped up. Like I want to run through a brick wall and just write 50 short stories tonight. So
Yeah, man.
it's a great way to leave the podcast. So thank you so much, Nathaniel. Anything you want to say before we sign off?
Where can we find you, Frank? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I am on Substack primarily with the Pulp, Pipe, and Poetry magazine, the variety magazine for pulp fiction, poetry, essays, articles, reviews of both film and books. I'm
And
also on Instagram.
Some tobacco too, right?
And tobacco products too. Yeah, we do have a bit of pipe tobacco reviews as well. Yeah, it's the variety magazine that's on digital. Hopefully soon to be physical as well for a later conversation.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm also on Instagram if you want to follow me there. My link is my profile is public, so yeah, you can find me on those places.
Perfect.
Beautiful. Yeah, we'll have it all linked for sure. All right. I know the deal by now, Nathaniel. I'm getting there.
Good man. Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming out. It was a blast.
Thank you for having me, fellas. This has been excellent. I admire what you both do. I appreciate what you both do. You guys are really, you're not just bringing attention to a genre. You're really building a community for guys about a primarily guy genre. So yeah, I commend you for all the work you guys do. You guys are awesome, and I hope a lot of people tune in and appreciate not just this episode, but the subsequent podcast in itself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys next time on that note. Appreciate you.